Good afternoon. This is Cass in Court TV. Miss Public Info here. Court is in session. Who's ready for the first lesson? Here we go. This is day 29 of the Diddy trial, guys. Today was a little bit, mundane. There's a few little newsy items here that I can report to you. You're probably hearing it across the airwaves here. First of all, first things first is that the Diddy defense team, did indeed motion for a Rule 29. They argued for Rule 29, which they took every single count, and they argued against every single count, saying that there was not any sufficient evidence. There was insufficient evidence for each and every count that the government has charged on the case. Whereby, therefore, according to Rule 29, the trial court would then have to find their client not guilty or acquit him automatically based on the rule, based upon insufficient evidence. That said, Judge Submarinian then asked the prosecution if they had any arguments, to which the prosecution said that they would, didn't really have any arguments, that they felt that there was enough evidence in the case to proceed, but that they were welcome for the judge to reserve his decision. And what that means is to what I explained in my Rule 29 video, which is to reserve his decision until after the arguments, until after the closings, and then right before deliberations or after deliberations. So reserve it for some time, his decision, until sometime after those procedures take place in the court. So it's up to Judge Submarinian for when he decides to give his answer, his decision rather. And then Submarinian asked Mr. Combs. He asked Mr. Combs, how was he doing? And Mr. Combs replied, I am doing well, thank you. And you are doing a great job, Mr. Combs said. He was probably trying to score some extra brownie points. I'm not sure that pleasantries and salutations are going to help in a federal criminal RICO trial, but you never know. I mean, you throw in the kitchen sink and you throw in the Hail Marys and you never know what sticks, You're fighting for your life. I get it, Sean Diddy Combs. I really do. That said, they went on with the continued cross of the summation witness that the prosecution had. The prosecution went ahead and officially arrested because they didn't have any more witnesses. They also did not have any more. They didn't have a recross for this as well. I'm just looking down at my notes. And then they took care of a ton of housekeeping items. They made note that I think, and then after that, the defense brought their case. So as I stated, the defense did not have to call any witnesses, which they did not call any witnesses. What they did was they brought forth or presented a bunch of exhibits. So these exhibits, included text messages. They included a lot of text messages and photos and things that exhibited, the relationship between Cassie and Combs, that showed that Combs, I think in one of them, he says that, Cassie is his best friend, and it shows, Cassie being, pleasant towards him and saying that, she, feels, love towards him, and it even shows one of the messages that they brought forth shows that she had agreed to one of the freak offs, or a freak off, and that she had agreed to it, that she stopped at the store and got some baby oil even. So this is what I was talking about in my other video when I was saying that all the defense needs to do is present doubt. That's all. And it doesn't have to be a large chasm of doubt. It can be these small little crevices, these small details of doubt that come in that can really sort of break down the exterior of the prosecution's case. And it's up to the jury what they want to believe, what they want to take with them as being fact. And this is why the closings, again, I'm reiterating to you all, this is why the closings are very important. The closings are important because this is where everyone gets to roll back the clock and go back to 6 weeks ago where we started with this thing and sort of remind the jury of what was presented, of what witnesses said, of what they didn't say, of what was shown, of what wasn't shown. And so that's what some of this defense case is outlining here. And they go through and they talk about, they go through and instead of bringing witnesses, they show text messages of what I would call would-be witnesses, right? So, Cassie Ventura, Daniel Phillip, who, is an escort, I believe. And then you have some commentary and some evidence from the defense as it relates to Mia, who claims that Mr. Combs RAPED'd her, and so they keep hammering home that Mr. Combs, that Mia's interviews do not indicate that Mr. Combs initiated sex with her, and that Miss Bagalan, which is the young lady who says that he hung her over the balcony, that she did not initially say that Mr. Combs told her, "I could kill you," at a photo shoot. And that was part of the prosecution's case, that he had threatened to kill her, that he RAPDED'd Mia. And so this is how they sort of close out their case. And the defense go on to say that 3228, which is an exhibit that they brought forth to prove what I've just said, they claim is proving what I just said, was not admitted, and that they may have more. And then they rested on that. So they took about probably an hour to present their case, maybe less time than that, because I'm out here reading in transcription land. And so they rested on that, and after that, the government said they're not gonna present a rebuttal case, and then the judge dismissed the jurors. The jurors will not be in tomorrow, but they're going to come in on Thursday for the closings. So court will proceed tomorrow, and it's probably going to look a little bit like the defense and the prosecution coming together with the judge to get these jury instructions together to work on that. And jury instructions can be quite lengthy. I mean, they could be a lot of pages, like a lot. And I think this is going to be a long day on tomorrow to get these jury instructions worked out. I know they've already been kind of, working on them to a large degree. But, so the judge says Tomorrow it will be, he says, I'm calling an audible. Tomorrow it will be noon, change conference. I hope we don't have to object during defense submission. We don't think it'd be appropriate for Mr. Aglifilio to bring up current events for use of U.S. resources. And Mr. Aglifilio said fine. And this is after the government had said that they do not expect that the jurors will be able to begin deliberations until Monday, because it's going to be a lot of argument on Thursday and probably Friday. I'm thinking that the prosecution will take a good part of the day on Thursday for their closing. And then the same for the defense. But definitely the prosecution is probably going to take the good part of Thursday for their closing. Yeah, so that's really how it looks. I think that we're all just sitting here, just sitting tight now, just trying to see how this thing is gonna go. There's things up in the air. I'm sure no one is as nervous as Mr. Combs right now, because this is like getting towards the end. This is, kind of like this is it, sort of thing. And now we just wait. Once the jury starts to deliberate, then the clock starts. The clock starts for the government. Everyone's nervous at that point, because this is months and in the making for the government, who have been working on this case for so long, and they have certainly put a lot into this. And this is the defense months, but this is also their client's life that's on the line. And then they're also, in a situation where, even though they're hoping for a great outcome, they're preemptively preparing for the not so good outcome, because they're preparing for appeals as we speak, likely, so that if a conviction comes back, they're going to appeal immediately. They're going to immediately enter their appeals so that they don't skip a beat. So if you're the defense, you're on pins and needles until they say not guilty on all, because you literally, up until that moment, are working to, working on a just in case, on a contingency plan is what I should say. You're working on a contingency plan on each side. Well, if our client goes free, then blah 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 blah. Great, won't have any. But if he doesn't, just in case he doesn't, we need to work on appeals and this, that, and the third. And so it definitely puts you in sort of like this very odd holding pattern. I've never worked for a defense team, so I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like waiting on a verdict. And the prosecution is just as nervous, because I think the prosecution is very, very aware that there is a high likelihood, because of the nature of the case, the kinds of counts that it is, the who it is in terms of the defendant, that it's a high likelihood that this could end up being a mistrial. And that is something that the government doesn't want, for a myriad of reasons. But one of the main ones is, it's just like, we don't want to try this again. We want to get this and get it done and keep it moving, So, they're hoping they don't have to try it again, that they don't have to have a mistrial, but that's something that they have to contend with, possibly. So I think both sides have a lot to chew on. Both sides are still very much in work mode, because they're preparing for closings, as well as preparing, their jury instructions, which will be very healthy, a healthy set. I also expect the jury to come back with a lot of, not a lot, but let me rephrase. I would not be surprised if the jury came back with quite a few questions. Not because the prosecution or the defense didn't do a good job at like explaining, the case or putting forth their cases or whatnot, but just because of the kind of case it is. It's a RICO case, and these are cases where this isn't like something that a layman person hears every day, or people who are non-lawyers. This is not something that they have to deal with every day, so it wouldn't be abnormal for this jury to have questions about the components of RICO. Obviously they're going to have that in the jury instructions. The kinds of questions I would expect them to have is maybe they're going to have all the exhibits and everything to look at, but they may have questions about the counts. Can we find guilty on this and still be within the confines of the RICO? Or if we don't find guilty on for instance, if we don't find the sex trafficking charges, the SEX trafficking charges, guilty on Jane Doe, does that mean we cannot find the SEX trafficking charges guilty on Cassie Ventura? For an example, just for an example, that might not be it, but like those are the kinds of questions that I would expect for them to ask, just because this is not something that they do every day. These aren't attorneys, but juries are very intelligent, and I think people don't give them the credit that they deserve, because I've heard people say, well, these are people who are like just like run-of-the-mill everyday people, but run-of-the-mill everyday people who work at banks and who work at grocery stores, or who are postal workers, they are very intelligent people and should not be judged by the kinds of work that they do just because you think it doesn't take a lot of brain power, or just because someone doesn't think that they're not as intelligent as a doctor or whatnot. But people are very intelligent, and I would not shortchange these individuals to be easily confused because it's a RICO statute or anything like that. I think these people are very invested. I think they have been sitting there diligently for 6 weeks. I think they've been spectators of a very competitive sport, if you will, or competitive debate, if you will. And I think that they are ready to do their part. They're ready to get involved. They're ready to show up as participants in their part. Juries are very eager to participate. So I think everybody should just be ready to, hear what the jury has to say, respect the verdict, whatever it is. We may not understand it, but it is the jury's decision, whatever it might be, and move forward with that. What I would really hope is that also, that whatever the decision is, that the jury is not, in any way, shape, or form disrespected. Because I think that, this is a high profile case, and there's a lot of people who want to point fingers when things don't go the way that they think it should go. And oh, well, it should have been more men, or it should have been more women, or it should have been more black people, or it should have been more these kind of people, or whatever. And I hope that this doesn't just bottom out as just becoming a race thing, because I think really just I don't really think that's what this is. I really do not. I think really what this has to do with is a violation of the law, and the government is seeing that we have some violations here, so we need to put this on trial to see what really comes out in the rents and let the people decide. And I really think that's what's happening. I think when people get into situations where they feel pressured, and they're put into situations that they're not used to being in, because they're the ones that are used to calling the shots, and they're the ones that are used to telling people what they need to be doing, then they automatically get in a mode of defense. And sometimes they utilize ammunition as though, like, I'm being targeted for X, Y, and Z reason. So that's a natural defense mechanism in certain cases. in this particular case, it's not, in my opinion, it's not plausible. But in other people's opinions, it might be. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'm very interested to know. Let's have a very formal conversation about it. Let's have a constructive debate about this. I'm very interested to see what, subscribers think. If they think this is based upon race, if they think that P. Diddy is being targeted because he is a rich black man, if they think that this is, there's validity to this, that this is what it's going to be. And also, I want to hear in the comments what you think that the verdict is going to be. What do you think the verdict's going to be? Do you think this is going to come back, all guilty, all not guilty, or a mixture? Anyway, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you guys for hanging in there. I know I came kind of like at the end, but there's other things going on. I'm definitely going to come to you guys with another episode today, because there's some more high profile things going on in the country, and I'll get to it. All right, we're adjourned for now. Thanks, guys. Bye.